The massive space station hung in the void like a jewel against the darkness. Zenith Prime was the heart of the Galactic Federation, a place where hundreds of alien species met to decide the fate of civilizations. Today, the Grand Hall buzzed with excitement and tension. The newest species in the galaxy had arrived, and not everyone was happy about it. Captain Ji-hoon stood near the observation window of the human delegation quarters, watching alien ships drift past. His uniform was crisp and new, designed specifically for this moment. Behind him, Dr. Yuna was reviewing her notes for the 100th time. She was nervous, and it showed. "Do you think they'll accept us?" Yuna asked, looking up from her datapad. Ji-hoon turned and gave her a small smile. "We're about to find out." Ambassador Tayo entered the room, his face serious. He was an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. First contact with alien life. Membership in a galactic community. It should have been the greatest day in human history. "They're ready for us," Tayo said. "Remember, we represent all of Earth today. Show them we're worthy." The three humans walked through the corridors of Zenith Prime. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved past them. Some had multiple arms. Others floated without legs. A few looked almost human, while many looked like nothing Earth had ever produced. Yuna tried not to stare, but it was impossible. This was everything she had dreamed of as a young scientist. The council chamber was enormous. Thousands of seats rose in circular tiers around a central platform. Representatives from 847 different species filled the room. The noise was incredible, with translation devices converting hundreds of languages into a constant hum of sound. Tayo led them to the platform. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight fell on the human delegation. The room grew quiet. A towering figure stepped forward from the front row. His skin was dark red, covered in scales, and his eyes glowed yellow. This was Overlord Vexler, leader of the Krathian Empire. His species controlled 17 star systems and commanded the largest military fleet in this sector of space. The Krathian Empire objects to this admission. Vexler's voice boomed through the chamber. Humanity has barely left their home world. They have no right to sit among civilized species. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some aliens nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain. Tayo stepped forward calmly. "We come in peace. Earth seeks only friendship and knowledge." Vexler laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "Peace? Your planet's history is written in blood. We've studied your species. Thousands of wars. Nuclear weapons. Chemical warfare. You nearly destroyed yourselves multiple times." Ji-hoon felt his jaw tighten, but he remained silent. Everything Vexler said was true. Humanity's past was dark. "That's exactly why we're here," Tayo replied. "We learned from our mistakes. We united. We choose peace now." Another figure rose from the upper tiers. This one was ancient, barely moving, supported by floating technology. It was an archivist, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They were librarians and historians, keeping records that stretched back millions of years. The council should hear the old warnings. The archivist's voice was thin but clear. "Our records speak of humans, or rather, their ancestor species." The chamber fell completely silent. Even Vexler turned to look at the old creature. "What warnings?" asked the council speaker, a being made of pure energy contained in a crystalline form. Millions of years ago, a species like these humans spread across multiple galaxies. They were explorers and warriors. They left warnings on dead worlds and in ancient databases. The message was always the same. Beware the endurance predators. Beware those who refuse to stop. Beware those who turn their capacity for destruction into art. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard theories about ancient human ancestors, but nothing like this. Vexler snorted dismissively. Myths and legends. Look at them. 3 humans in simple clothes. Their ship took months to reach us. Their weapons are primitive. They are no threat. The archivist slowly lowered back into its seat. I have delivered the warning. What the council does with it is not my concern. The council speaker's crystalline form pulsed with light. The Federation will vote. All in favor of granting humanity provisional membership? About half the chamber raised appendages, tentacles, or simply glowed in agreement. It wasn't a strong majority, but it was enough. All opposed? The other half responded, with Vexler's section the loudest. The motion passes. Humanity is granted provisional membership. This session is... Wait. Vexler's voice cut through the chamber. If the council insists on this foolishness, then the Krathian Empire claims the Sol system under the right of conquest. That system is rich in resources. We have more need of it than these primitives. Gasps filled the chamber. The right of conquest was an ancient law, rarely used. It allowed any species to challenge another for control of their territory through military force. Taiho's face went pale. You can't be serious. That law is barbaric. The law exists, Vexler smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. And I invoke it. Humanity has 30 cycles to evacuate the Sol system. After that, we will remove you by force. This is your only warning. The council speaker tried to interrupt, but chaos had already erupted. Aliens were shouting at each other. Some laughed at humanity's predicament. Others looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. The strong dominated the weak in this galaxy, and humanity looked very weak indeed. Ji-hoon grabbed Taeho's arm. We need to leave, now. The 3 humans made their way out of the chamber as quickly as dignity would allow. Once they were back in their quarters, Taiho activated the quantum communicator. The image of Earth's Defense Council appeared on the screen. Ambassador? Asked Admiral Minho, a stern-faced military officer. What happened? Taiho took a deep breath. They've given us an ultimatum. The Krathian Empire is coming. They're giving us 30 days to abandon Earth. 30 days? Admiral Minho's expression didn't change, but his knuckles went white as he gripped his chair. And if we refuse? Then they'll come with their entire fleet to remove us by force. There was a long silence. Then Admiral Minho nodded slowly. Thank you, Ambassador. Return home immediately. And tell Captain Ji-hoon to start flying faster. We have preparations to make. The screen went dark. Ji-hoon looked at Yuna, who was shaking. They don't know what they're doing, she whispered. Do they have any idea what humans are capable of when cornered? Ji-hoon thought about Earth's history. The wars, the weapons, the absolute refusal to surrender even when facing extinction. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times, and each time they had somehow survived and come back stronger. No, Ji-hoon said quietly. They don't know. They think we're weak because we choose peace. They're about to learn the difference between can't fight and won't fight. Outside the window, the Krathian fleet was already beginning to assemble. 10,000 warships, the largest military force ever gathered in this sector. They expected an easy victory. They expected humanity to run or surrender. They had no idea what was waiting for them back on Earth. They had no idea that humanity had spent 200 years building weapons in secret, hoping never to use them. They had no idea that the warnings in the ancient archives were not myths. The galaxy was about to remember why humans had once been feared across the stars. And this time, the lesson would be written in Fire.Earth had changed since. The message arrived from Zenith Prime. The streets were quieter. People looked up at the sky more often, as if they could see the alien fleet coming. News channels ran constant updates. Children asked their parents if the monsters were real. And deep underground, in hidden facilities across the planet, humanity prepared for war. Admiral Minho stood in the command center beneath Seoul, watching dozens of screens showing military preparations around the world. Ships were being moved. Weapons were being loaded. Soldiers were saying goodbye to their families. He had spent 40 years in the military, but he had never imagined this. Fighting other humans was one thing. Fighting aliens from across the galaxy was something else entirely. "Admiral, the outer colonies are almost evacuated," reported Colonel Sora. She was young for her rank, only 32, but she had earned her position through skill and courage. "The civilian transports are heading to the inner system." "Good," Minot said. "What about the ghost cores?" Sora smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We're ready. My teams are equipped and eager." The Ghost Corps was humanity's most elite special forces unit. They specialized in boarding actions, sabotage, and close quarters combat. They trained in zero gravity and high gravity. They learned to fight in vacuum and toxic atmospheres. They were the best humanity had to offer, and they frightened even other human soldiers. Across the room, Engineer Dong-Yoon was typing furiously at his console. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept properly in days. As head of the Prometheus Protocol, he carried a terrible responsibility. The weapons he was preparing had been locked away for 2 centuries, being too dangerous for use even against other humans. "Status report?" Minho asked him. Dong-Yoon looked up, his hands shaking slightly. "The Ragnarok stations are online. All 6 of them. Nuclear launch systems are armed. The kinetic bombardment satellites are positioned. The cyber warfare divisio. And has viruses ready. Admiral, are we really going to use all of this?" Minho walked over and put a hand on the younger man's shoulder. "My grandfather fought in the Third World War. He told me stories before he died. Stories about choices people had to make. He said the worst thing wasn't pulling the trigger. It was knowing you had to, and still hoping you wouldn't." "Did he have regrets?" Dong-Yoon asked. "Every day of his life," Minho replied. "But he also said that his regrets kept him human. The moment we stop feeling the weight of these choices is the moment we become monsters." On another screen, Ambassador Tayo was giving a speech to the United Earth Council. His face was calm, but his voice carried the weight of the moment. "We tried peace. We extended our hand in friendship. They responded with threats and invasion. Now we must show them who we truly are. Not because we want to, but because we must. Our children are watching. History is watching. And we will not fail them." The council members voted unanimously to authorize military action if the Krathian Empire entered the Sol system. The vote was symbolic. Everyone knew there was no other choice. In her laboratory on the moon, Dr. Yuna was working with a team of xenobiologists. They had samples of Krathian technology recovered from their embassy ship. She was trying to find weaknesses, studying their shields and armor. "Their technology is impressive," Yuna said to her assistant. "But it's standardized. They build everything the same way. There's no innovation, no adaptation. Is that bad for them?" Her assistant asked. "It means they've never needed to change. They've never faced an enemy that forced them to evolve," Yuna explained. "We've spent our entire history fighting each other. Every war taught us something new. We adapted or died. They've just been crushing weaker species for so long they've forgotten how to struggle." A message came through on her communicator. It was from Captain Ji-Hung, whose ship was now part of Earth's defense fleet. "Dr. Yuna, you should see this. We intercepted Krathian communications. They're taking bets on how long we'll last." Yuna opened the file and read through the translated messages. Krathian commanders were joking about the coming battle. Some bet it would take 3 hours. Others said 6. The longest estimate was 2 days. They were laughing about it, making entertainment out of humanity's destruction. She felt anger rise in her chest, hot and sharp. Then she pushed it down. Anger was useful, but only if controlled. Her grandmother had taught her that. Her grandmother had survived the climate wars and watched entire cities burn. She had told young Yuna that the people who survived weren't the angriest or the strongest. They were the ones who could think clearly when everyone else was panicking. "Forward this to Admiral Minho," Yuna said calmly. "He should know how seriously they're taking us." Director Hana was overseeing the evacuation of Mars Colony when the alert came. 3 Krathian scout ships had been spotted at the edge of the solar system. They weren't attacking yet, just watching, gathering information, testing Earth's response time. "Should we engage?" asked her military liaison. "No," Hannah said firmly. "Let them look. Let them see our civilian transports fleeing. Let them think we're scared and weak. Aren't we scared?" The liaison asked quietly. Hannah looked at him, terrified. But being scared doesn't mean being helpless. It means being aware of the danger. And aware people prepare. The last transport lifted off from Mars, carrying the final group of colonists to the safety of Earth's inner defenses. Hannah watched it go, then turned to her remaining staff. "Now we wait. And when they come, we show them what happens when you threaten a human's home." Back on Earth, Admiral Minho gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. The holographic display showed the solar system and the projected path of the Krathian fleet. 10,000 ships, more firepower than any human military had ever faced. "They outnumber us 50 to 1, Minho said calmly. "Their ships are larger. Their shields are stronger. Their weapons have longer range. By every logical measure, we should surrender right now." He paused, looking at each officer in turn. But logic doesn't account for one thing. They chose this fight. We didn't. They're coming to take our home because they think we're too weak to stop them. They think our choice of peace means we can't fight. They're wrong. Colonel Sora stood up. "Admiral, the Ghost Course has a saying. We are the nightmare that protects the dream. Permission to show these aliens what human nightmares look like?" "Permission granted," Minho said. "But remember, we're not monsters. We do what we must, nothing more. When this is over, we still have to live with ourselves." The officers left to join their units. Minho stood alone in the command center, looking at the screens. In 8 hours, the Krathian fleet would reach Earth. In 8 hours, the galaxy would learn what happened when you poked the sleeping bear. He thought about his grandfather again. The old man had kept a journal from the war. Minho had read it once, years ago. One entry had stayed with him. His grandfather had written, "We are capable of terrible things. But knowing that and choosing not to do them, that's what makes us human. Today, I had to do terrible things. I pray my grandson never has to. But if he does, I pray he never forgets the cost." "I haven't forgotten, grandfather," Minho whispered to the empty room. "I just hope the galaxy can forgive us for what we're about to do." Across Earth, in 1,000 cities and towns, people gathered with their families. They held each other. They prayed to their various gods. They sang old songs and told old stories. They remembered who they were and where they came from. Humanity had crawled out of caves and tamed fire. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had split the atom and walked on other worlds. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times and always somehow found a way to survive. Now, facing an alien empire that saw them as nothing more than primitives to be swept aside, humanity remembered something important. They weren't the strongest species. They weren't the smartest or the fastest, but they were the most stubborn. They were the ones who refused to quit. They were the species that had turned warfare into science and science into art. The Krathian Empire was about to learn a hard lesson. Peace is not weakness. Mercy is not surrender. And a human backed into a corner is the most dangerous thing in the universe. 8 hours until contact. 8 hours until the galaxy learned the truth. The Krathian Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of metal locusts. 10,000 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their hulls gleamed in the light of distant stars. Their weapons powered up with an energy signature that lit up every sensor screen in the solar system. Overlord Vexler stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Around him, his officers prepared for what they expected to be a short, one-sided battle. On the main view screen, Earth hung in space, a blue and white jewel that would soon be theirs. Status of the human fleet? Vexler asked lazily. "They're waiting for us, Overlord," his tactical officer reported, surprise in his voice. 200 ships in formation near Mars. Vexler laughed. "They're actually going to fight? How entertaining. Signal the fleet. We'll destroy them quickly and get this over with." The Krathian fleet moved forward in perfect formation. They had done this hundreds of times before. Overwhelm with numbers. Crush any resistance. Claim the prize. It was simple and efficient. On Earth, Admiral Mino watched the alien fleet approach. His command center was silent. Everyone focused on their tasks. On the screen, the human fleet looked tiny compared to the massive Krathian armada. "All ships report ready." "Admiral," reported his communications officer. "Tell Captain Ji-hoon to begin." Minho said quietly. In space, Captain Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of the Soul's Fury, humanity's largest dreadnought. It was still smaller than most Krathian cruisers, but it was packed with weapons that no alien had ever seen before. "Fire the first volley," Ji-hoon ordered. Humanity's opening move shocked the Krathians. Instead of energy weapons or missiles, the human ships launched what looked like simple metal rods. Tungsten projectiles, each one weighing several tons, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The Krathians almost didn't bother dodging. What could primitive kinetic weapons do? Then the first rods hit. At relativistic speeds, mass became energy. The impacts tore through Krathian shields like paper. Ships exploded, their armor useless against the sheer physics of the assault. In the first 10 seconds, 100 Krathian vessels were destroyed. What was that? Vexler roared. "How did they—" "Admiral, their weapons are using raw kinetic energy. Our shields aren't designed to stop physical projectiles at those speeds." "Then adjust. Return fire." The Krathian fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes filled space. The human fleet scattered, their smaller ships more maneuverable than the massive alien vessels. Some human ships took hits and exploded. Others limped away, damaged but still fighting. But humanity's response was just beginning. "Activate the Ragnarok stations." Admiral Mino ordered from Earth. 6 hidden weapons platforms throughout the solar system came to life. They had been disguised as asteroids and debris, positioned over months of careful planning. Now they revealed themselves, and with them, weapons that humanity had promised never to use again. Nuclear pumped gamma ray lasers. In the millisecond of a nuclear explosion, before the bomb destroyed itself, it could pump a laser with more power than a star. These beams lanced out, invisible until they struck their targets. Krathian ships simply vanished, vaporized by radiation so intense that matter ceased to exist. What kind of monsters are they? A Krathian officer screamed. Vexler's face had lost its smug confidence. "All ships evasive action. Find those weapons platforms and destroy them." But the Ragnarok stations were already moving, using small thrusters to change position. And they weren't alone. Thousands of automated drones swarmed out from hiding spots throughout the asteroid belt. Each one carried enough explosives to cripple a ship. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually controlled by advanced AI that could predict Krathian movement. The drones overwhelmed the Krathian point defenses. Ships tried to shoot them down, but for every drone destroyed, 10 more got through. Explosions rippled through the alien formation. "Launch Reaper Squadron," Ji-hoon ordered. Lieutenant Yoonji led a wing of 50 experimental fighters. They were small, fast, and carried weapons that made no sense to alien observers. The fighters dove into the chaos of the battlefield, weaving between larger ships with impossible agility. Yoonji locked onto a Krathian cruiser and fired. Her weapon was a swarm of smart missiles, each one powered by its own AI. The Krathian ship's defenses tried to intercept them, but the missiles learned from each attempt, adapting their approach in real time. They struck the cruiser's weak points with surgical precision, and the massive ship broke apart. "This isn't possible." Vexler screamed. "They're primitives. How are they doing this?" His science officer looked up from his console, fear in his eyes. "Overlord, I've analyzed their tactics. They're using warfare techniques we've never seen. Adaptive AI, kinetic weapons, nuclear technology that should be impossible. And their cyber warfare division is attacking our systems." As if to prove the point, several Krathian ships suddenly went dark. Their communications cut out. Their weapons stopped firing. Engineer Dong-yoon's viruses had penetrated their networks, taking advantage of the standardized systems that made Krathian technology so predictable. "Fall back to defensive formation," Vexler ordered, but there was no defensive formation that could help them. The human fleet was smaller, but it fought with a coordination born of centuries of warfare against themselves. Every tactic had been refined through blood and loss. Every weapon had been tested against the only enemy that had ever truly challenged them. Other humans. Colonel Sora's moment came when a Krathian battleship, crippled but still functioning, tried to retreat. Her Ghost Corps team launched from a nearby human ship in small boarding pods. The Krathians barely noticed them among all the other chaos. The pods attached to the battleship's hull and cut through. Sora and her team entered the alien ship in full combat gear. The Krathians inside had never faced boarding actions before. They were unprepared for close-quarters combat against humans who had trained for exactly this. Scenario: Sora's team moved through the ship like shadows, silent, efficient, deadly. They reached the bridge in under 4 minutes, securing it before the crew could respond. Sora stood over the Krathian captain, her weapon pointed at his head. "Surrender your ship," she said calmly. The captain stared at her in disbelief. You're supposed to be afraid of us." "You made a mistake," Sora replied. "You thought we couldn't fight because we chose not to. Now surrender before I change my mind about keeping you alive." The battle raged for 3 hours. 3 hours that felt like an eternity. When it finally ended, the results were clear. Of the 10,000 Krathian ships that had entered the Sol system, fewer than 300 remained. They floated in space, damaged and defenseless. The rest were debris. Humanity had lost 47 ships and 12,000 personnel. Every death hurt, but they had won. Vexler sat in his command chair, staring at the view screen in disbelief. His fleet, the pride of the Krathian Empire, was destroyed. He had come expecting to crush primitives. Instead, he had been crushed. "Open a channel to the human flagship," he said quietly. Captain Ji-hoon's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but resolved. "We surrender," Vexler said, the words like poison in his mouth. How did you defeat us?" Ji-hoon was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice hard but not cruel. "You called us primitives because we use kinetic weapons and nuclear technology. But these aren't primitive weapons. They're refined ones. We've spent hundreds of years perfecting the art of killing, not because we wanted to, but because we had no choice. Humans fight humans, and that forced us to become better at war than any species should ever be. You thought our choice of peace made us weak. You were wrong. Peace is what we choose when we have the power to destroy. And you forced us to show you that power." Vexler closed his eyes. The ancient warnings had been true. All of them. What happens now? He asked. "Now you survive," Ji-Yoon said. "Because unlike you, we don't kill defeated enemies. We offer them a chance to do better." The channel closed. Vexler sat alone with his shame and defeat, while around him, the galaxy began to understand what humanity truly was. News of the Battle of Terra spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species with access to long-range communications heard the same impossible story. The humans, barely a decade into space travel, had destroyed the Krathian armada. 10,000 ships reduced to debris in 3 hours. The species that everyone had mocked and dismissed had proven to be the most dangerous military force the galaxy had seen in centuries. On Zenith Prime, emergency council sessions ran day and night. Representatives who had voted against human membership now wished they could take it back. Those who had laughed at humanity's primitive appearance now looked at their own defenses and wondered if they would be enough. The archivist who had warned the council sat in the observation gallery, watching the chaos below. Another elder archivist joined them. "You tried to tell them," the second archivist said. "They didn't want to listen," the first replied. "They never do. Every few million years, someone discovers humans again and makes the same mistake. They see a species that chooses peace and assume it means they can't fight. They forget that the most dangerous beings are those who know exactly what they're capable of." Down on the council floor, Ambassador Taiho stood at the central platform. He had returned to Zenith Prime with a military escort this time. 3 human warships waited nearby, a reminder of what had happened to the last fleet that threatened them. The council speaker addressed him, its crystalline form pulsing nervously. "Ambassador Taiho, the council wishes to officially apologize for the actions of the Krathian Empire and to offer full membership to humanity with all rights and privileges." Taiho looked around the chamber. He saw fear in alien eyes. Good. Fear meant respect. Fear meant they would think twice before threatening Earth again. "The human government is prepared to accept full membership," Taiho said. "But we have conditions." Murmurs filled the chamber. Defeated species didn't make demands. But humanity wasn't defeated. They were victors. First, the right of conquest law must be abolished. No species should face what we faced. Second, we require access to all galactic trade routes and technology sharing agreements. Third, we want a permanent seat on the High Council with veto power. "That's outrageous," shouted a representative from the Velnari Collective. "No new species has ever been granted High Council status." Taiho turned to look at the speaker. "No new species has ever defeated an armada of 10,000 ships either. We didn't ask for this war. We didn't want to show the galaxy our weapons. But you forced our hand. Now you deal with the consequences." The council speaker consulted with other senior members. Finally, it turned back to Taiho. "Your demands are accepted. Welcome to the High Council, Ambassador." But not everyone was happy with this new reality. In secret meeting rooms across the galaxy, leaders of various species gathered to discuss what they called the human problem. Warlord Krell of the Vaxian Horde addressed a group of 20 species leaders through encrypted channels. "We all saw what happened to the Krathians, but they were arrogant and stupid. They gave the humans time to prepare and fought them in their home system. where humans had every advantage. "What are you suggesting?" asked a Torgan admiral. "I'm suggesting that if we strike together, quickly and without warning, we can eliminate this threat before humans spread across the galaxy. We have the numbers. 200,000 ships from all our fleets combined. We hit Earth directly, with everything we have, before they can deploy their defenses. And if we fail?" asked another voice. Krell's image on the screen showed a species that looked like a cross between a shark and a gorilla, all teeth and muscle. "Then we'll be no worse off than we are now. But if we succeed, we remove the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The coalition agreed. In secret, they began moving their fleets, careful to avoid detection. They had 6 months before they would be ready. 6 months to prepare for a second attack on humanity. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Yuna was working with Krathian prisoners. Not prisoners of war, exactly. More like guests who couldn't leave. Hundreds of Krathian officers and crew members fro. The destroyed fleet had been brought to Earth for medical treatment and debriefing. One of them was Overlord Vexler himself. He sat in a comfortable room, nothing like a prison cell, while Yuna interviewed him. "Why do you treat us so well?" Vexler asked. "We came to destroy you." "Because that's who we are," Yuna replied simply. "Yes, we can be terrible in war, but we can also be merciful in victory. We learned a long time ago that how you treat your enemies defines you as much as how you treat your friends." Vexler shook his head. "Your species makes no sense. You have weapons that terrify me. You could conquer half the galaxy if you wanted. But instead you offer peace? Power without restraint is tyranny," Yuna said. "We spent centuries learning that lesson the hard way. Our worst wars weren't against aliens. They were against each other. We nearly destroyed our own planet several times. But we learned. We grew. We became better than our worst instincts." "The galaxy fears you now," Vexler said quietly. "I know, and I wish they didn't. But fear is better than contempt. When they mocked us, they threatened us. Now that they fear us, maybe they'll leave us alone." Admiral Mino was dealing with similar issues. He received reports daily about increased military activity around human space. Species that had ignored Earth before were now watching carefully. Some wanted to trade. Others wanted to form alliances. And a few, Minho suspected, wanted to attack before humanity grew stronger. Colonel Sora brought him troubling intelligence. "Admiral, we've intercepted coded communications between multiple species. They're planning something. A coalition, maybe. We can't confirm yet, but the chatter suggests another attack might be coming." Minho wasn't surprised. "We humiliated them. Showed them that their assumptions about military power were wrong. Of course, some of them want revenge or to eliminate the threat before we spread. What do we do?" Sora asked. "We prepare. Again. And we hope we don't have to use what we've built." Director Hannah had a different perspective. She was working on rebuilding the outer colonies and establishing diplomatic relations with friendly species. Not everyone in the galaxy was hostile. Many smaller species saw humanity as potential protectors against larger empires. "We can't just be warriors," Hannah argued in a council meeting on Earth. "We need to show the galaxy we're more than weapons and tactics. We need to share our culture, our art, our science." "Hard to do that when they're planning to attack us again," countered a military representative. "Which is exactly why we need to do it," Hannah insisted. "We need allies, friends, species who will speak up for us in the Galactic Council. Fear alone won't keep us safe in the long run." She was right, and everyone knew it. Earth began broadcasting music, literature, and art to any species willing to receive it. Dr. Yuna established the Cultural Exchange Institute, bringing alien students to Earth to learn about humanity directly. One of the first students was a young Krathian named Torval. He was Vexler's nephew, and he had volunteered to study on Earth as a gesture of reconciliation. "My uncle was wrong about your people," Torval told Una. "We all were. We saw your choice of peace as weakness because we never had to choose. We've always been strong, always dominant. We never learned restraint because we never needed it." "Maybe you can teach your people," Una suggested. "Show them what you've learned here." "Maybe," Torval said doubtfully. "Or maybe it's too late. The galaxy has chosen to fear you rather than understand you." Back on Zenith Prime, Ambassador Tayo gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. He stood before the full council and spoke clearly and firmly. "We didn't ask to be feared. We asked to be friends. You refused. We didn't ask for war. You brought it to us. We didn't ask to show you our capacity for violence. You forced us to reveal it. Now you see us as a threat, and perhaps we are. But let me tell you what else we are. We are the species that landed on our moon and said, 'We come in peace for all mankind.' We are the species that built monuments to our fallen enemies and taught our children that war is a failure, not a glory. We are the species that holds funerals for individual soldiers and remembers their names. We can destroy you, yes, but we would much rather understand you. The choice is yours. See us as enemies, and we will defend ourselves. See us as friends, and we will stand with you. But never, ever make the mistake of thinking our kindness is weakness again." The chamber was silent when he finished. Then, slowly, representatives began to rise. First one, then another, then dozens. They were applauding. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to matter. The galaxy was changing. Humanity had forced it to change. And now everyone had to decide what kind of future they wanted to build. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Terra. Earth had changed in ways both visible and invisible. New defensive stations orbited every major planet. Human ships patrolled the outer system constantly. But more importantly, humanity was learning to be part of a galactic community. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges happened daily. For the first time in history, humans and aliens walked the same streets as neighbors rather than enemies. High Chancellor Minji had been elected to lead Earth's Galactic Affairs Division. She was young, only 45, but she had proven herself capable of balancing military readiness with diplomatic outreach. Today she sat in her office on Zenith Prime, reviewing intelligence reports with growing concern. "Admiral Minho, we need to talk," she said into her communicator. Minho's face appeared on the screen. He was back on Earth, overseeing training exercises. "You've seen the reports about the Coalition." "I have. 20 species. 200,000 ships. They're planning to attack within the week." Minji's voice was steady, but her worry was clear. "Can we survive that many?" "Survive? Probably. Win? That depends on how fast they move and how coordinated they are." Minho paused. "Chancellor, I need to know. Do we have permission to use everything we have? If we hold back and lose, Earth falls. If we don't hold back, we'll be doing things that will haunt us forever." Minji closed her eyes. This was why leadership was so heavy. Decisions that affected billions of lives rested on her shoulders. Do what you must. But Admiral, try to show restraint where you can. We're not trying to exterminate them. We're trying to survive. Understood. Minho out. The Coalition fleet assembled in a remote star system, far from prying eyes. Warlord Krell stood aboard his flagship, surveying his assembled forces through holographic displays. 200,000 ships from 20 different species. It was the largest military force gathered in this galaxy in over 1,000 years. "Remember," Krell addressed his commanders, we strike fast and hard. No warnings. No chances for them to deploy their tricks. We overwhelm them with pure numbers before they can respond. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading straight for Earth. But humanity had learned from the Krathian attack. They no longer waited at home for threats to arrive. Scout ships watched every approach to the solar system. Advanced sensors monitored space-time for the signatures of large fleets. And when the Coalition fleet jumped, human observers saw them coming hours before they arrived. All hands to battle stations, Admiral Minnow ordered from his command center. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Coalition fleet inbound. Estimated arrival in 2 hours. This time, humanity didn't just defend Earth. Captain Jihoon's fleet moved to intercept the Coalition far from the home system. They met the enemy at the edge of the Kuiper Belt, where the sun was just a bright star among many. Colonel Sora's Ghost Corps was already in position, having infiltrated Coalition space weeks ago. At Minho's signal, they activated cyber warfare programs that had been carefully planted in Coalition communication systems. The results were immediate and devastating. Warlord Krell's flagship suddenly lost contact with half his fleet. Ships couldn't coordinate. Orders got confused or simply never arrived. The carefully planned assault dissolved into chaos before the first shot was fired. What's happening? Krell roared. Get our communications back online. But Engineer Dong Yun's viruses were more sophisticated than before. They didn't just shut down systems. They made the Coalition ships see false targets, redirected weapons to fire on their own allies, and generally turned the Coalition's size from an advantage into a liability. When the human fleet opened fire, they didn't use the overwhelming force they had shown the Krathians. Instead, they targeted specific ships, command vessels, communication relays, support craft. They disabled rather than destroyed when possible. Lieutenant Yunji's fighter wings swarmed through the confused Coalition formation. Her orders were clear. Take out engines, not life support. Cripple ships, don't vaporize them. It was harder, requiring more precision and skill, but it aligned with humanity's goal. They wanted to win, not commit genocide. The battle lasted 6 hours. By the end, the Coalition fleet was defeated, but not destroyed. 70,000 ships were disabled and drifting. Another 50,000 had retreated in disorder. The rest were scattered across the system, damaged and leaderless. Human casualties were lighter than expected. 8 ships lost, 3,000 personnel dead. Every death still hurt, but compared to what it could have been, it was a miracle. Warlord Krell's flagship was boarded by Colonel Sora's team. They found him still alive, sitting in his command chair in shock. When Sora entered the bridge, he looked at her with something between fear and confusion. Why didn't you kill us all? Krell asked. You had the power. You could have destroyed the entire fleet. Sora removed her helmet, letting him see her face. Because that's not who we are. We fight when we must. We defend what's ours. But we're not conquerors or exterminators. We're protectors. There's a difference. I don't understand your species. Krell said. Then maybe you should try learning instead of fighting. Sora replied. The aftermath of the second battle transformed galactic politics completely. The Coalition species, humbled and defeated, had to acknowledge reality. Humanity wasn't just strong. They were dominant. But more importantly, they were merciful. High Chancellor Minji stood before the Galactic Council 3 days later. Behind her, on screens visible to everyone, footage of the battle played. But the footage showed something unexpected. It showed human ships towing disabled alien vessels to safety. It showed human medical teams treating wounded aliens. It showed mercy in action. We could have destroyed you, Minji said, her voice carrying through the chamber. Every species that attacked us. We had the weapons. We had the opportunity. But we didn't. Do you know why? Because we've seen what happens when power is used without restraint. We've done it to ourselves. We've nearly destroyed our own world multiple times. We learned the hard way that strength without wisdom is just another form of weakness. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Galactic Federation has a choice to make. You can keep seeing us as a threat and keep attacking. We'll keep defending ourselves and winning. Or you can accept us as partners. Learn from us as we learn from you. Build something better together. The choice is yours, but understand this. If you attack us again, we will respond. And next time, we might not be as gentle. The Council voted that day to grant humanity unprecedented authority. They were given command of the Federation's peacekeeping forces. They were granted access to all restricted technologies. And most importantly, they were given a voice in every major decision the galaxy made. Overlord Vexler, released from custody and returned to his people, became an unlikely advocate for humanity. He traveled across the Krathian Empire, telling anyone who would listen about what he had learned. They're not monsters, he told his people. They're something more terrifying and more wonderful. They're a species that knows exactly how terrible they can be, and they choose every day not to be that. They could rule this galaxy through fear and force. Instead, they offer partnership. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. Dr. Yuna's Cultural Exchange Institute grew into a major galactic institution. Thousands of aliens studied on Earth, learning about human history, culture, and philosophy. And thousands of humans studied on alien worlds, learning that the galaxy was full of wonders they had never imagined. Captain Ji-hoon led the first joint human-alien exploration fleet into uncharted space. His crew was half human, half alien, working together to discover new worlds and new civilizations. Admiral Minho retired to teach at the military academy. His students were both human and alien, learning from someone who had fought two of the largest space battles in galactic history. His lessons always included the same message. Power is easy. Anyone can destroy. But building something? Protecting something? Choosing mercy when you could choose vengeance? That's hard. That's what separates civilizations from barbarians. Years later, a new species discovered humans for the first time. They had heard stories, warnings, legends about the Terrans. They prepared for war, expecting monsters. Instead, they found a species that greeted them with open arms and offers of friendship. But near every human colony and station, there was a memorial. And on that memorial was a simple message that every species in the galaxy had come to know. We are humanity. We choose peace, but we remember war. Attack us, and you will learn why the galaxy warned you. Leave us in peace, and we will be your greatest ally. The choice has always been yours. The new species chose peace. Most species did now, because the galaxy had finally learned what the ancient archives had tried to tell them from the beginning. Humanity's wrath was unmatched, yes, but their mercy was even more powerful. And that combination made them the most important species in the galaxy, not because they were the strongest, though they were, not because they were the smartest, though they were brilliant, but because they were the species that had learned to be better than their worst instincts, and they were willing to teach that lesson to anyone who would listen.